Imagine Earth with 6 different human civilizations developing simultaneously. Different bodies, different brain architectures, different cultures, different ways of making tools, and burying the dead and understanding the sky above them. 6 separate experiments in what it means to be human, running in parallel on the same planet at the same time. That isn't a thought experiment. That was reality. And for a significant stretch of prehistory, if you could have looked down at Earth from above, you would have seen all of them, alive, breathing, thinking, surviving, spread across continents that would one day belong entirely to just one of them. Only one lineage is sitting where you're sitting right now. The question worth asking is why, and the answer is stranger, darker, and more contingent than almost anyone finds comfortable. Let's establish the full picture first, because most people have no idea how crowded the human family tree actually was. At various points in the last 300,000 years, Earth was home to Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, Homo floresiensis, and possibly others we haven't found yet. Not sequential. Overlapping. Some of these species coexisted for tens of thousands of years. Some almost certainly encountered each other. Some know from DNA evidence did more than encounter each other. This wasn't one story with one protagonist. It was 6 stories running simultaneously, most of which ended in complete extinction, leaving no descendants, no records, nothing but bones and fragments, and, if we're lucky, a recoverable strand of ancient DNA. Start with Homo erectus, because the scale of their existence deserves to stop you for a moment. They survived for over 1 million years. Let that land. Homo sapiens have existed for roughly 300,000 years, and we've already reshaped every ecosystem on the planet. Homo erectus walked the earth for more than 3 times that span. They spread from Africa across Asia, reaching as far as the Indonesian archipelago. They made fire. They crafted symmetrical hand axes that required planning and skill. They crossed open water, which means some form of watercraft, which means cooperative problem solving at a level we consistently underestimate. And then, somewhere between 108,000 and 117,000 years ago, they were gone. Environmental shifts, habitat fragmentation, increasing competition from other hominins. A species that had outlasted almost everything the planet threw at it for 1 million years simply ran out of margin. Not because they were weak, because the world changed faster than their population could absorb. Neanderthals are the ones people know, and still the ones most inconsistently misunderstood. They were not dim-witted brutes shuffling through Ice Age Europe. They were cold-adapted, physically powerful, cognitively sophisticated people who controlled fire, buried their dead with what appears to be intentional ceremony, created pigments and jewelry, and cared for injured group members who could not have survived without assistance. The evidence for Neanderthal compassion is written in bones. Healed injuries that required months of dependent care from others who chose to provide it. They disappeared around 40,000 years ago, not in a single decisive confrontation. Gradually, patchily, across thousands of years, their populations contracted and fragmented. Small group sizes meant low genetic diversity. Low genetic diversity meant reduced resilience to disease and environmental stress. Climate instability during this period was severe. And Homo sapiens were expanding into exactly the territories Neanderthals had occupied for hundreds of thousands of years. We didn't necessarily destroy them in battle. We may have simply out-networked them. More on that in a moment. The Denisovans are the most haunting entry in this list, because we know them almost entirely from DNA rather than fossils. A finger bone fragment, a few teeth, a jawbone. That's essentially the entire physical record of a human species that ranged across Asia for hundreds of thousands of years and interbred with both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. We know they existed at scale because their genetic legacy is still measurable in living. Tibetan people carry a Denisovan gene variant that enables survival at high altitude, a biological gift from a species that has otherwise completely vanished. Populations in Papua New Guinea and Aboriginal Australians carry the highest levels of Denisovan ancestry of any living people, between 4 and 6%. They were real, they were widespread, they were genetically significant enough to alter the survival capacity of the populations they bred with. And we have almost no idea what their world actually looked like, because the Earth swallowed nearly all of them. They disappeared around 30,000 to 40,000 years ago, under circumstances we still don't understand. The Denisovans remain the largest blank space in the human story. Homo floresiensis is different in a way that makes them genuinely difficult to process. They were small, roughly 1 meter tall, with brains significantly reduced from the Homo erectus ancestors they likely descended from. They lived on the island of Flores in Indonesia, isolated long enough that island dwarfism reshaped their entire biology. They made stone tools. They hunted pygmy elephants. They were, by any reasonable definition, human. And they were doing it at roughly 1/3 your physical scale. They disappeared around 50,000 years ago. Homo sapiens were expanding through the Indonesian archipelago at exactly that time. Whether it was direct competition, disease transmission, or simply resource pressure, we can't say with certainty. What we can say is that the timing is not coincidental. Now, some of you are thinking, Homo sapiens must have simply been smarter, more advanced, superior in some measurable way that made the outcome inevitable. It's a comfortable explanation. It's also probably wrong. Neanderthals had brains as large as ours, possibly larger. Homo erectus demonstrated technological innovation and geographic expansion that would be remarkable by any standard. The Denisovans interbred with us successfully, which means our cognitive and biological differences weren't as vast as we prefer to imagine. What Homo sapiens had wasn't superior intelligence. It was superior connectivity. Our social networks were larger and more geographically extended than any other hominin species. We traded across longer distances. We shared innovations across group boundaries. When one population developed a better tool or hunting technique, that knowledge moved. It traveled. It spread through networks of exchange that other species simply didn't maintain at equivalent scale. When climate shifted or food sources collapsed, we had connections elsewhere to draw on. Other species had their immediate group and nothing beyond it. We had a network, and in moments of crisis, the network was the difference. Geography mattered. Timing mattered. Luck mattered more than the story of human exceptionalism comfortably allows. Homo erectus survived 1 million years before circumstances ended them. Neanderthals built a culture sophisticated enough to include compassion, art, and ceremony. The Denisovans shaped the genetics of populations living right now, today, in Tibet and Papua New Guinea, their biology still functioning in living bodies millennia after their last member died. These were not failed experiments. They were complete human stories that simply ended, in some cases ended partly because we arrived. Extinction doesn't target the weak specifically. That's the thing worth sitting with longest, because we've built an entire story of human history around the assumption that it does. It targets the isolated, the over-specialized, the populations whose margins were already thin when conditions shifted without warning in a direction nobody could have anticipated or prepared for. Homo floresiensis was isolated on an island with no escape route and no outside network to draw resources from when pressure arrived. Neanderthals lived in small, fragmented groups with low genetic diversity, resilient enough across hundreds of thousands of years until the window of tolerance for their particular configuration simply closed. Homo erectus had already been contracting for millennia before competition intensified beyond what their remaining populations could absorb. None of them failed, not in any meaningful sense of that word. They survived ice ages, predators, volcanic winters, and continental migrations. They made tools, controlled fire, crossed water, cared for their injured, and buried. They did everything a species needs to do to persist, and they persisted for stretches of time that make our entire recorded history look like an afternoon. They simply ran out of room, out of redundancy, out of network, at precisely the moment when network was the only thing that mattered. 5 complete human stories ended. Languages lost before language was written down. Knowledge systems erased before knowledge could be stored anywhere outside a human mind. Ways of understanding the world gone so completely that we cannot even imagine what was lost because nothing survived to tell us. One story continued, not because it was destined to, not because it was categorically superior, but because of connectivity, adaptability, geography, and the specific, fragile, unrepeatable luck of expanding at exactly the moment the others were contracting. That lineage built cities, wrote history, and called itself the inevitable outcome. It wasn't. It never was. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more.